Hi guys, welcome to the another session on JMeter tutorial. So in the today's session we are going to learn how we can do Beanshell scripting in JMeter. So let's get started, and if you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and also click on the bell icon to get the updates on the latest videos. So let's move ahead and let's look into Beanshell. So first of all, we are going to see what is Beanshell. So Beanshell is a scripting language which is developed in Java, and it can dynamically execute the standard Java syntax as well. So let me write it down. Beanshell is a scripting language developed in Java. It can dynamically execute standard Java syntax. And since this Beanshell is a scripting language, it has common scripting features like loose type, commands, etc. Okay, so what is this loose type? So this loose type means in the Beanshell script, variables are declared without any type. So I'm going to write variables are declared without any type. Okay, so we will see this in detail in few minutes, what is this loose type. And now that we are familiar with the Beanshell, let's try to understand why Beanshell is required in JMeter, why we need to do Beanshell scripting in JMeter, because JMeter has provided most of the functionalities which are required for performance testing. Whether you want to read data from CSV file, you can use CSV dataset config. Whether you want to handle dynamic values, you can use regular expression extractor, you can use assertions, you can use timers, etc. So we have seen all these in previous sessions, but why we are doing this Beanshell scripting? So we are doing this Beanshell scripting because even if JMeter has provided the most of the functionalities required for performance testing, but we want to customize our script in our way, we want to add if else condition in our way. That's why we want to use this Beanshell scripting in JMeter. So let me write it down also, why Beanshell scripting required in JMeter. So I will simply write to customize our script in our own way. So that's why we are going to use this Beanshell scripting in JMeter. So we can execute the Beanshell scripting in JMeter in three ways. So first way is by using Beanshell sampler. Second way is by using Beanshell preprocessor. And the third way is by using Beanshell postprocessor. So by these three ways we can use Beanshell scripting in JMeter, and let's look into each of these one by one. First we are going to look into the Beanshell sampler, how we can use Beanshell sampler in JMeter. So let's look into that. So for that I'm going to navigate to JMeter. Let's create a new test over here. So right click on test plan, add and threads. In the threads we will select the thread group, and here I'm going to add a sampler, that is the Beanshell sampler. For that, again right click on thread group, add, and the sampler. In the sampler we are going to use Beanshell sampler. So this is the Beanshell sampler. This is the part where we are going to write the script, and what it says, the following variables are defined for the script. So these are all are the variables. So what this means, Beanshell sampler has provided a predefined list of variables which we can use in the script. So let me write it down also. It has provided predefined list of variables which we can use in our script. So let's see all those variables and let's see how we can use them in our script. So first variable which we are going to see is the vars. So before var we are going to define a variable. Now this loose type comes into picture, which we have seen earlier. So what is this loose type? It means that variables are declared without any type. Now suppose I want to declare a variable link which is of type string, and since Beanshell scripting is a loose type, it follows loose type, we don't need to write like this, that is string link. Okay, so we don't need to write like this. We don't need to define the type of the variable, that is string type of the variable. We don't need to define. So in the Beanshell scripting, how we can define a variable? We simply need to write like this, var link. That means that this link is defined as a variable. So we have not written the type of the variable. That is the meaning of loose type, which we have seen few minutes ago. So I hope that's clear now. So we have defined the link as a variable. Now I want to assign a value to a variable. So how to use that? Now we are going to use this vars. So let me use the vars as well. Vars dot put, I'm going to write link. So what value you want to provide to the link, you will write over here. So I'm going to write google.com. So what this means, it means that this www.google.com has been assigned to the variable link. So now this link variable I want to use in the next request. So how to use that? So I'm going to use a new request now. So for that, again, right click on thread group, add sampler, and now I'm going to use the HTTP request. So let's add this request, and in the server name I'm going to use the variable link. So how to use the variable link, we have already seen in the previous sessions. To use a variable, you need to enter a dollar symbol, curly brace start, and you need to provide the variable name and the curly brace end. Okay, so my test is ready, and now let's do the execution, and to see the result we need a listener. So for that, again, right click on thread group, add listener. I'm going to add view result tree listener over here, and let's do the execution and let's see the result. So let me save it, Beanshell 1. I have saved it and the execution started and it got over. So this was my Beanshell sampler. This was the request which got passed, and this is the script. This is equivalent to the script which we have already passed over here. And in the HTTP request, you can see this www.google.com got passed. So how it got passed? Because in the Beanshell sampler, I have defined a variable link, and in the link I have assigned the value www.google.com, and this link we have used in the HTTP request. So when we executed that one, this value got passed to the link and it got executed over here. So in this way you can use this method, that is vars.put, and let me write it over here as well. Let me write it over here. This is the first variable which we learnt. It is used to set the value of a variable. And now let's look into some other variable as well. I'm going to write vars.get link. So what it will do, now I will assign this to another variable, var x. So what it will do, this method will provide the value of the link to the variable x. And now I want to print the value of this variable x inside the logs. So how to do that? I'm going to use another method, that is log.info, and I will write value of x is X. Okay, and now we need to enable the log viewer also. So for that you will go to options and you will enable the log viewer. So we have enabled the log viewer. Let's clear the result and let's do the execution again. So you can see the logs from here, and if you see over here the value of X is www.google.com. So that got displayed over here. Okay, so we learned two other methods as well. Let's write it inside. We can write over here. So vars.get, what it is used for, to get the value of a variable. Okay, so you can use this vars.get to get the value of a variable, and here the variable is link, which we have used the variable as link. And we have also used this log.info. So what is this used for? To print the value inside the logs, to print inside the logs. Okay, so we have seen all these. Now let's look into some other methods as well. Now suppose we want to get the name of the thread which is getting executed. So how to use that? For that we are going to use some other variable. So the variable which we are going to use now is ctx. So what is this ctx? Ctx is the most powerful variable inside Beanshell because it represents the JMeter context class, and it provides read-write access to underlying JMeter engine samplers results as well. So we will see this now, how we can use this ctx. Ctx is used as, we can write ctx dot get thread dot get thread name. Okay, so we can use like this, and again we can assign the result to a variable. I can write variable y as this, and we can put it inside log.info, and we can write thread name is plus y. Okay, so let's clear the result and let's do the execution. So you can see over here value of X is google.com and the thread name is thread group 1. Okay, so in this way you can get the thread name from here, and in a similar way you can also get the thread number. For that you will write get thread num. So in this way you can use the ctx variable as well. So let me write it over here. So it can be used to get thread name. Okay, so in this way you can use the Beanshell sampler. Now that we are familiar with this Beanshell sampler, let's look into the Beanshell preprocessor now. For that I'm going to add a new thread group. So add threads and the thread group, and in the thread group I'm going to add two HTTP requests now. So again, to add the HTTP request, you will right click on the thread group, add sampler and the HTTP request, and again I'm going to add another HTTP request. So for that, right click on the thread group, add sampler and the HTTP request. So in the first HTTP request I'm going to give the name as 1, and I'm going to give the server name as google.com, and in the second request I'm going to give the name as 2, and I'm going to give the server name as wikipedia.org. Okay, so what I did, I have added two requests in the thread group, in the second thread group, that is the first and the second. So what scenario I want to do? I want to execute this HTTP request 2 only when this HTTP request 1 gets passed. Only then I want to execute this HTTP request 2. Otherwise, I don't want to execute this one. So how to do that? We are going to see now with the help of Beanshell preprocessor. So I'm going to disable this thread group. We have already seen this one. So let's focus on this one. Let's focus on this thread group, and here I'm going to add one preprocessor, Beanshell preprocessor. So for that, right click on the request, add, and in the add we have this preprocessor. In the preprocessor we have Beanshell preprocessor. Let's add that one. So what this preprocessor will do, it will execute the script whatever we will write over here before executing this request. So in the Beanshell preprocessor, what we have these variables available over here. We can use these variables. We have already seen ctx vars. We are going to see now prev. So the prev is used to fetch the result from the previous sampler, and in this case, in this thread group, what is the sequence of execution? So the thread will execute the HTTP request 1, then it will come to HTTP request 2, and here the thread will see that there is one Beanshell preprocessor, and when the preprocessor is executed, the preprocessor is executed before the execution of the request on which it is placed. So the sequence will be, the sequence of execution in this case will be HTTP request 1 and then Beanshell preprocessor, and then the HTTP request 2 will be executed. So in this case, for the Beanshell preprocessor, the previous sampler is HTTP request 1. So if I am using this prev variable inside HTTP request to Beanshell preprocessor, it's going to fetch the values, it's going to fetch the result of HTTP request 1. So let's look into that. So I'm going to fetch the response code and the response message of the HTTP request 1. So how to do that? So for that I'm going to write prev.get response code. Okay, and I'm going to assign this inside a variable. So for that I'm going to write var response code, that is rc, equal to this, and I'm going to get the response message also. So I'm going to add var response message equal to prev dot get response message. So first let's print these values inside the log so that you can get an idea what we are going to do. So I'm going to write log.info rc is variable name is rc, and I'm also going to print response message. So for that I'm going to write rm is, I'm going to write over here rm. Now let's add a listener also to see the results, and we will enable the log viewer as well. So inside the thread group, add and listener, and in the listener we are going to add view result tree listener, and in the options we can enable the log viewer. So let's do the execution. The script is not over as of now. We just want to check what all message we get in the rc and the rm. So let's start the execution, and you can see over here this rc is 200, response code we received is 200, and the response message we received is okay. And in the view result tree we can see that http request 1, that is google.com, got passed, and in the 2 wikipedia.org got passed. Okay, now let's modify this request. Let's remove this one. Okay, so since we have not provided the server name, this will fail. We will not get the response code. So let's clear the result now, and now let's do the execution again. So you can see over here rc is non http request code. That means we are not getting this 200 response code which we were getting earlier. And if you see the view result tree, this is the http request 1 and this is the http request 2. So what is our scenario? We don't want to execute this request if this request 1 gets failed, and in this case, this even if this request is getting failed, this request is getting executed because we have not provided any script for that. So we are going to provide a script for that, so that if the request 1 fails, this request 2 doesn't get executed. So how to do that? Let's look into that. So what I'm going to write, I'm going to write a if condition. If rc, that is the response code, dot equals 200, Then what I'm going to do, if rc dot equals not equal to 200, if this response code we are not getting as 200, what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the thread. So once the thread will be stopped, then http request 2 will not get executed. So I'm going to copy this code. This is used to stop the thread. This is the method to stop the thread. So if this response code is not equal to 200, what to do? If this response code is not equal to 200, please stop the thread, so that once the thread is stopped, this http request 2 won't get executed. Okay, so this is our scenario and our script is complete. So let's clear the result and let's do the execution. So what is the expectation? Since in the http request 1 we will not get response code as 200, and we have provided in the script, if the response code is not 200 of the http request 1, what to do? Stop the thread and don't run this http request 2. So now we will see the result. So let's start the execution, and you can see my execution is over. This http request 1 got failed because we have not provided anything over here, and my re response code is not equal to 200. My response code is non-http response code. That means it is not equal to 200, and since it was not equal to 200, this http request 2 doesn't get executed. Okay, so now if I provide the server name over here, we will, and once we will do the execution, the response code will be 200, and since the response code will be 200, this http request 2 will also get executed. So I'm not going to remove this result. Let's do the execution again. So you can see this http request 1 got executed with the response code as 200, and since the response code was 200, and it doesn't meet this criteria because it says that response code not equal to 200. If the response code is not equal to 200, then only execute this command. Since this condition doesn't met, that's why http request 2 also got executed in this case. So in this way you can use the preprocessor according to your requirement in your project. That was all about the Beanshell sampler and the Beanshell preprocessor, and in the next session we are going to look into Beanshell postprocessor as well. Okay, that's all for this session, and if you have any query, please put in the comment section below and I will try to solve your queries. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.